They call it modern-day slavery.
You cannot imagine how the poor working conditions those people are facing.
They say it can trap entire families for generations. They say it's against the law. But it is thriving and it is building modern Cambodia. Part of the problem is this. The Mekong River, a lifeline, depleted, pushing Cambodians into an industry that's firing the country's growth at the expense of the poor. Gold Tower 42. If there is any building that could encapsulate Cambodia's meteoric economic rise, it would be this. After decades of conflict, construction began on the country's first skyscraper, radically changing the face of Phnom Penh into a modern city.
On almost every corner, on almost every street, something is under construction. It is a city that is undergoing a massive transformation. The sounds of construction, the churning of cement trucks, the screeching of cranes, the clunk and the clank of metalwork, all this fast becomes background noise. After years of war, it is a city that is enjoying an unprecedented boom. These sounds of construction, for many, is also the sound of progress.
Cambodia is one of Asia's, if not the world's, fastest growing economies, expanding at an average of 8% annually in the past decade. And Cambodia's glimmering skyscrapers and bustling streets appear to testify to that.
40 ឆ្នាំជាងមកនេះឃើញថាវាមានការរីកចម្រើនលើគ្រប់វិស័យដូច្នេះហើយគឺការរីកចម្រើនលើគ្រប់វិស័យហើយធ្វើឲ្យប្រជាជនយើងបានត្រៀមលក្ខណៈសម្បត្តិគ្រប់គ្រាន់ក្នុងការតាមទាន់សភាពការនយោបាយក៏ដូចជាសេដ្ឋកិច្ចសង្គម
But it appears that the long shadows of Cambodia's edifices of wealth and progress conceal a much deeper darkness.
There's a lot of project of condominium, apartment, housing apartment, and so on and so forth. That's kind of market demand. Then that is the increase of the brick industry and the increase of violation, increase of the injury, increase of number of people exploited, including the increase of child labor in the industry.
Concrete paved roads vanish as we drive on unsigned dirt tracks, seemingly leading to nowhere. Then we see it, rows of brick kilns. Here, cameras are not allowed, for it's a world that wants to remain concealed. These workers are bonded laborers, forced to live and work in appalling conditions in exchange for loans from their creditors, the brick kiln owners. They can only leave when they no longer owe any money. But with wages of as little as $2.50 a day, their debt can take years or even generations to pay off. Meach came to this brick kiln with his parents when he was 17. Now 23 years old, he makes just $2.50 a day if he's lucky. He is now $2,000 in debt. Today was one of those days. They borrowed rice from their neighbor and made fish soup with what they caught from the pond. This life of borrowing has been difficult to shake off for this family. Chanrong's parents were farmers from the agricultural province of Kampong and came to Phnom Penh to escape a debt they owed in their hometown. But unable to dodge debt collectors, they borrowed $1,000 from the brick kiln owner, and the entire family has lived here ever since. To repay the loan, the entire family works from midnight to noon the next day. They do not have a fixed salary, and they are paid by the number of bricks they shift or mold. But still, they struggle to earn enough, because they only get around $1 for every 150 bricks they make by hand. They have no way to be more productive. Bricks are made here in the cheapest way possible, manually, without modern machinery. Work here isn't just difficult, it's dangerous. It's hard to say if the miscarriage was caused by her working and living conditions, but the environment speaks for itself. Dirt floors and walls made of galvanized iron sheets, these makeshift huts look temporary, but they're not. Fumes from the kilns seep through, the dirt and dust no different from outside. The small huts house as many as 11 people. Primitive cooking, bathing and toilet facilities are shared amongst hundreds of brick kiln laborers and their families.
The living conditions in this brick kiln is horrific. Entire families live in these tiny little huts. There's no toilet, no electricity, no running water. It's overcrowded, poorly maintained, completely lacking in sanitation. Yet despite this living condition, it is an industry that is in no shortage of new recruits because people are desperate enough to keep bonding themselves into work in this burgeoning brick industry that is feeding Cambodia's construction boom.
Over 10,000 Cambodians currently reside in brick kilns across the country, a number that increases every year. In 2006, the government counted 70 brick kiln factories nationwide. 10 years later, the number increased to almost 500. Almost half rely on manual labor, refusing to invest in modern machinery or improve safety measures. These decades-old kilns are fueled by coal, wood, and sometimes even industrial waste, like discarded textiles and rubber, releasing noxious gases, smoke, and dust over the entire compound 24 hours a day. It's also dangerously hot. At its peak, this kiln can reach 650 degrees Celsius.
This is really not the type of job that anyone chooses to do. The air is so thick with soot that it catches in your throat. It is so hot that the heat stings every part of your body. For the workers here, the hours are long. The work grueling, back-breaking, and often dangerous. None of the workers here wear protective gear, and stories of illnesses, disease, and injury are common.
A few seconds was all it took to change 10-year-old Srey's life forever. She reached into the brick machine to clean off some clay and got trapped. Like it would with clay, the machine pulled her arm in and crushed it. Her mother will never forget her screams.
ពេលហ្នឹងឃើញកូនអញ្ចឹងភ្លាមខ្ញុំស្រីហៅគេខ្ញុំបានពីដំបងឡើងខ្ញុំបានបលុតម៉ាស៊ីនលុតដល់ពេលម៉ាស៊ីនហ្នឹងលុតខ្ញុំយកកូនចេញអត់រួចពីក្នុងឥឡូវខ្ញុំស្រីហៅអ្នកជិតខាងឲ្យមកជួយមកខាឥឡូវបវល់ជាដើម្បីយកកូនចេញពីឥឡូវ
But it was too late. She lost her arm to the machine.
សោកស្ដាយដែរបងរឿងការអស់នេះគឺថាហេតុតែខ្ញុំអត់ហេតុតែខ្ញុំពិបាកដូចថាទីតលមិនដឹងទៅអីក៏សម្រាប់ចិត្តទៅតោះតែកូនមានគ្រោះថ្នាក់បាត់បង់ដៃ
Kim's family moved to the factory about 6 years ago to borrow $3,500 from the brick kiln owner to buy land in the home province. To repay the loan, Srey and her 12-year-old sister stopped school to work at the factory as well. Altogether, they make just $5 a day, barely enough to feed the family, much less service the loan.
ខឹងខ្លួនឯងផងដល់ពេលណាខ្លួនឯងពិបាកមិនដឹងទីពឹងអីរកអីច្បាស់លាស់ដល់ពេលហ្នឹងតូចចិត្តរងឯងចេះទៅលួចមើលកូនអីចឹងពេលទៅផ្សារឲ្យឃើញខោអាវស្អាតស្អាតដៃវែងដៃដូចថាអាវនៅផ្កាតកូនគុណនឹកឃើញមកកូននឹកថានឹកទៅមុខទៀតកូនហ្នឹងតូចចិត្តនឹកគ្នាអត់ចិត្តប៉ុណ្ណា
Officials say brick factories across Cambodia are free of child workers, but our visit to the kilns tells a different story. A survey of over 460 kilns by the Builders and Woodworkers Trade Union Association found that 28% of those residing in brick kilns are children.
A lot of child labor in the industry also, because those people migrate with the whole family, mother, father, and children. And the children have to drop school. I mean, those people who work in the brick factory, they are coming from the poor family, so their children have to drop school.
Srey brought her family to the brick kiln 6 years ago. She requested we conceal her identity.
ពីមុនខ្ញុំធ្វើស្រែនៅខេត្តកំពង់ចាមដល់ធ្វើទៅដូចថាហូបមិនគ្រប់មិនកិនក៏ខ្ញុំលក់ទៅមកធ្វើការឡូអត់
Her children, aged 6 and 8, regularly work with her at the factory unloading bricks from the hot kilns. They all wake up at 3 a.m. and work until noon the next day.
មានអារម្មណ៍ថាស្ដាយអាណិតកូនព្រោះអត់មកអត់បានរៀនយើងខ្វះខាតអត់បានមានអីលុយអីទៅរៀនឲ្យទៅរៀនដល់អញ្ចឹងទៅកូនតូចតាចចេះជួយម្ដាយទៅ
In Southeast Asia, children in Cambodia have the highest risk of being used for labor, according to the 2020 Child Labor Index. Brick kilns aren't just a child labor hotspot, it's also a danger zone. At the Marist School for Children with Disabilities, just outside Cambodia's capital, Phnom Penh, the teachers here see injured children all the time.
និយាយភាគច្រើនដែលឡអត់ច្រើនពីការដៃឬជើងមិនតែកន្លែងបោះបងគឺឃើញតែដៃទេពេលដែលគាត់ចូលហ្នឹងគឺធម្មតាពេលយើងដាក់អិតហ្នឹងគាត់ធម្មតាក្មេងគាត់អត់អាចប្រយ័ត្នទេអញ្ចឹងទៅគាត់រៀងល្អិលតែដៃហ្នឹងវាចូលអញ្ចឹងខាងបងវិញបងជួបប្រទះខ្លួនឯងតែដៃទេ
At first glance, this looks like a typical class, but these students are actually of different ages, all in their first year in school, or learning at a first grade level. Their crisp uniforms and smiling faces are stark contrast to the soot they're usually covered in at the factory. Schools like this are vital in breaking the cycle of poverty that many are condemned to. There are cases of children inheriting debts from their parents and become bonded as individuals for a long time.
អញ្ចឹងជាគ្រោះថ្នាក់មួយដែលគាត់អត់មានការអប់រំអញ្ចឹងទៅថ្ងៃមុខមនុស្សយើងអត់មានការអប់រំធ្វើឲ្យមនុស្សខ្លួនឯងហ្នឹងវាងាយនឹងទទួលរងគ្រោះនៅបញ្ហាផ្សេងៗ
While it's encouraging to see these children in class, it's hard to say if they will ever finish primary school given their circumstances. It's a poverty cycle that's hard to break, and for many we spoke to, it starts here. From a river that's running out of time. Kampong Cham, an idyllic agricultural province on the banks of the Mekong River, a province that is experiencing one of the highest migrations to the brick kilns. Many leave because of this. The mighty Mekong reduced to a trickle because of climate change.
Climate change has caused increased temperatures, prolonged drought, reduced watershed. There's less rainfall and pests are increasingly posing a threat to farmers. For almost every farmer in this province, it is now a story of coping rather than doing, of managing in whatever way possible the task of farming in an environment that is no longer suited to age-old methods.
Khon Sokia's debt has been accumulating in recent years. She borrows money for fertilizer, chemicals and even water for her crops. She borrows for rice plants. She borrows to pay rent for the land. She knows that all it takes is for her last remaining harvest to fail, and her family of 7 will fall into unsustainable levels of debt.
Like ថាចេះចាស់ 3% នៅសល់តែ 1% ទេអស់ហើយព្រោះទឹកក៏អត់មានព្រោះវាស្កកទាំងអស់ព្រោះវាអត់មានទឹកពឹងទឹកភ្លៀងដល់ពេលអត់មេឃអត់ភ្លៀងផងបានទឹកពីណាមកមិនស្កក
Cambodia is one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. The entire agricultural sector has been battered by extreme weather in recent years. And for those who depend on it, survival has become more challenging.
និយាយទៅតាំងពី3ឆ្នាំមុនខ្ញុំទៅត្រីដល់ពេលថ្ងៃថ្ងៃ6អីថ្ងៃ4អីចាប់ដើមត្រូវបើឥឡូវនេះដល់ថ្ងៃ5ចិត្តថ្ងៃ6អត់ត្រូវឥឡូវនឹងមកវិស័យ ខ្វះខាតរឿងមហូបរឿងត្រីសាច់ទិញកអីហ្នឹងបើខ្ញុំអត់មានធ្វើស្រូវធ្វើប្រាំងគេផងបានរកតែត្រីហ្នឹងឯងដល់ពេលរកអត់បានទៀត
The only way for Maiprun and his family to survive is to take out loans. Loans that he knows will be difficult for him to pay off.
Bữa sân thìខ្ញុំធៀបទៅ 10 ឆ្នាំមុនណាមកឥឡូវនេះខុសគ្នា បើសិនជាមើលសន្លឹងមើលទៅប្រជាពលរដ្ឋថៃបាត់តែមើលឃើញថាមានការផ្លាស់ប្ដូរតាក់ទងនឹងលំនៅឋានមធ្យោបាយធ្វើដំណើរមានម៉ូតូមានអីយើងឃើញថាមានអញ្ចឹងប៉ុន្តែបំណុលច្រើនជាង 10 ឆ្នាំមុន 10 ឆ្នាំមុនគាត់ធ្វើស្រែបានផលល្អប្រភពត្រីធម្មជាតិគាត់អាចរកបានបរិភោគនិងបានលក់ថែមទៀតអញ្ចឹងណាបាទអញ្ចឹងបើថ្ងៃទៅពួកគាត់អត់សូវមានបំណុលទេប៉ុន្តែក្រោយ 10 ឆ្នាំនេះខ្ញុំគិតថាបំណុលមានច្រើន
Over the last decade, Cambodia's microfinance institutions, or MFIs, have been booming. Proponents say that it helps alleviate poverty by giving the rural poor a leg up instead of a handout. But critics say it could keep poor clients on an infinite debt treadmill, especially when new microloans are offered easily or existing loans extended with a higher interest rate. Around 20% of Cambodians have a microcredit loan outstanding, according to the Cambodian Microfinance Association. The average debt stands at $3,320, roughly twice the country's annual GDP per person. For activists, these estimates are conservative at best.
អានេះបើសិនតែយើងនិយាយទៅវាអាចនេះនឹងនយោបាយខ្លះដែរពិបាកអញ្ចឹងណាប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំគិតថាវាភាគច្រើនវា60ទៅ70% ដែលគាត់ត្រូវការកម្ចីពីមីក្រូហិរញ្ញវត្ថុសម្រាប់ធ្វើការងារហ្នឹង
And in order to pay off their microfinance loans, some farmers end up borrowing again, this time from brick kiln owners.
មានអ្នកខ្លះគឺគាត់ធ្វើស្រែធ្វើចការដល់ពេលហើយទៅគាត់ខាតព្រោះធម្មតាគាត់នៅស្រុកគាត់ធ្វើស្រែចការហ្នឹងគឺគាត់ខ្ចីលុយខ្ចីកាក់គេខ្លះដែរអញ្ចឹងណាហ្នឹងហើយដល់មកតាមគាត់ធម្មតាគាត់មិនខ្ចីមកដល់ខ្ចីគេដើម្បីទៅបោះដោះបំណុលនៅស្រុកអញ្ចឹងណាអញ្ចឹងកំណត់បតកែគឺគាត់យកលុយហ្នឹងដើម្បីចងកម្មករដើម្បីធ្វើការឲ្យគាត់ឲ្យបានច្រើនហើយយូរ
Eliminating debt bondage requires fresh commitment from the government. New legislation, better enforcement of laws, and setting up a minimum wage greatly improved the country's garment industry, once rife with human rights abuses.
ជាពិសេសគឺកម្មករគេហៅថាកម្មករក្រៅប្រព័ន្ធកម្មករក្រៅប្រព័ន្ធហ្នឹងរួមមានកម្មករសំណង់ដែលជាពលករសាធារណៈកម្មករលអិតហ្នឹងក៏ក្រៅប្រព័ន្ធដែរយើងខិតខំធ្វើយ៉ាងណាឲ្យបងប្អូនទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងចូលទៅក្នុងអង្គការហើយមិនមែនត្រឹមតែកម្មករលអិតនិងកម្មករសាធារណៈផ្សេងទេយើងគិតគូរដល់អ្នកបម្រើតាមផ្ទះទៅទៀតបាទដើម្បីធ្វើយ៉ាងណាឲ្យមានជាអង្គការចាត់តាំងហើយវាងាយស្រួលក្នុងការពារសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពរបស់បងប្អូនបាទ
ក្នុងនាងខ្ញុំជាតាជីពគឺខ្ញុំពឹងថាទៅថ្ងៃអនាគតនឹងរដ្ឋាភិបាលគាត់នឹងមើលឃើញពីភាពលំបាករបស់គាត់ក្នុងវិស័យលអិតខ្ញុំរំពឹងថាអនាគតទៅគាត់នឹងមានលក្ខខណ្ឌការងាររបស់គាត់ប្រសើរនៅពេលដែលគាត់យល់ដឹងបានច្រើន
And until that happens, many of the country's indebted farmers will have no choice but to take out loans from brick kiln owners and set out on what will be a journey in one direction. And as they pass the glistening skyscrapers of Phnom Penh, it is clear that the country's newfound urban prosperity has so far passed them by. For Assignment Asia, I'm Dusita Saokaew in Cambodia.